This is the Parra Cave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Parramatta Eels Club, home of the Eels, and also home of Jack's Pale Ale.
Welcome to another episode of the Parra Cave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Parra Cave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Parra Cave Podcast. It is your news and reviews podcast with Mr. Ben Shelley from the Corner Post. Ben, how are you going today, mate?
I'm doing well, mate. A little bit under the weather, but pushing on.
Good to hear, and good to hear that you're pushing on. Not good to hear that you're a bit under the weather, but nevertheless, rugby league, it's a game that never sleeps, and look, there's plenty of news to get through, so let's get straight into it. We've had a few contract signings through the week, and look, they have been big ones. We'll start off with the one that we all knew about, and that was Jonah Pezzett signing for 1 year at Parramatta. Still no Broncos deal signed, but 1 year at Parramatta. Now, I do have a close source who actually spoke to Jonah's dad, and apparently Jonah is really pumped to get to Parramatta and play for the Blue and Golds in 2026.
Yeah, and I'm pretty pumped to see him play for us as well. I think it's a pretty natural thing for him. Just to backtrack on what you just said there, though, I'm going to share an article with you right now because Brisbane actually announced yesterday that he will be joining them from 2027. So that has been confirmed now by Brisbane. Right. I still will maintain what I've been saying all along. That will be heavily monitored. I think there will be a lot of different ways to get out of that Brisbane contract. And I think that's something that we should keep an eye on because I do believe, like I've been saying for these past few weeks when we've been speaking about it, I do believe that Reynolds won't just go one more year. If he was going to go one more year, you wouldn't have bothered. You would have just retired after the grand final win. But if you're going to do one more, you might as well do two more. If you're going to do two more, you can get three more out of him. So I think there'll be some stipulations in that contract. But nevertheless, we'll see how it goes. At the moment, he's an Eel for 1 year, but I would definitely love to see him stay on for more than one.
Yeah, no, as you said, it certainly does make it very interesting. And I have heard Adam Reynolds over the last few days actually mention that. And he was on a podcast with Ben Dobbin, the Inside Ball podcast, the Queensland one up there. It's a good listen, actually. And he does say that there was no hint of retirement after the grand final or before the grand final. And, yeah, he is ready to play as long as his body holds up, and he's ready for 2026. And
well, that's the big wild card in all this, isn't it? Because it is that thing, as I was just saying. If you're going to retire, you would have done it by now. If he didn't have any aspirations of playing on for a couple more years, why would you bother to just go one more and possibly tarnish that legacy that you would have had you retired in the grand final? I think that really puts a big question mark on this Jonah Pezzett deal for Brisbane, because now he could be entering into a situation in Brisbane where it's the same as what he had at Melbourne. He could be entering into that club just to be sitting behind Reynolds again anyway. So You would imagine that there's got to be some sort of get-out clause or stipulation.
Well, this
surely.
This is it. And the same thing as well. I mean, if we would be hoping that Parramatta can go on and win the premiership next year, but if Parramatta do win the premiership next year,
or even if we just go really close,
why would you want to leave the club that you were successful at in winning a competition and or going very close. It's just it's the strangest NRL contract deal in history, I think. But nevertheless, all the rumours are put to bed now. He has signed a one-year
It's
deal.
actually something that we see quite often in other sports, especially sports like soccer. Like we see that sort of loan deal happen quite often. I know this isn't necessarily being touted as a loan deal, but it is something that we do quite often see. We see clubs loan out players from other clubs, and then they might have stipulations in the contract that suggest if the player performs to a certain level that they're obliged to sign that player permanently. There's a lot of things that we sort of see, but it's just not something we see in rugby league.
No. I think there was a few loan deals, so to speak, during the COVID times. I think Daniel Alvaro went to the Warriors at one stage.
Harry Grant springs to mind as well.
Yeah, Harry Grant went to the Tigers. And I think I can't remember anybody else off the top of my head, but there was a couple during that period when
I believe the Warriors and Titans had a couple.
Yeah,
had a few
and
that were sort of bouncing around between them.
Yeah,
I think Reece Walsh was one, actually. He went to the Warriors from Brisbane during that period and ended up staying with the Warriors until he went back to Brisbane as well.
Yeah, but it's certainly a big risk from Brisbane to sign him on a 3-year deal. I mean,
it's a big risk for everybody, really, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
There's three different stories that you can tell here.
I think Parramatta's the winner out of here because there's only one season at the moment. But I think it's a bigger risk for Brisbane because, I mean, obviously we don't want him to. But if rugby league's a strange game, if he gets injured next year, then that puts his Brisbane career on hold, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'll go another way as well, because a lot of other fans have been saying things along the lines of, what if Pezzett is really good for Parramatta, and then we just set him up for Brisbane, and then this Lorenzo character comes into the frame and he doesn't do so well. That's also a possibility there. We could be anchoring ourselves in that way. I was actually doing a little bit of research into some upcoming content that we've got going on earlier in the week, and I had a look back through the Holden Cup Player of the Years for the history of that popped up on my newsfeed.
Yep.
And there was quite a fair few players in there that looked like they were going to be phenomenal players coming out of the Holden Cup, and then just never went on to be anything in the NRL. So that's another risk that we're taking here by having this sort of bridge season with Pezzett, whereas we already know that Pezzett's NRL ready and that he can do it at the NRL level. So I don't know, there's so many different ways that this deal can be looked at, and we're just not going to know until probably 6-7 months from now.
Well, probably 11 months, 12 months from now, when the season's finished, I guess, and we can recap on that one. But he is a blue and gold player in 2026, and I did post a photo last night on Instagram and Facebook of him as a 4-year-old in his dad's arms. His dad, Troy, obviously played for the Parramatta Eels as well. Was the SG ball coach in 2007. So it's not the first time he'll be in a Parramatta jersey, but the deal is done now, and all we can do now is get behind him as a blue and gold player, like we do all our blue and gold players. The other big contract news, well, there's another 2 bits of contract news in the NRL, not so much to do with Parramatta, but just before we leave Parramatta, it just before we came out on air, that Matt Dury has extended his contract until 2027. That's great news for the Eels. I know Jason Riles is a big fan of his, and he played 18 games this year, and really came of age, so looking forward to seeing him next year as well. But South Sydney, they've landed themselves a big fish in David Fifita for a 2-year contract, I believe it is. What are your thoughts on David Fifita moving to the South Sydney Rabbitohs?
I have a few mates that are South Sydney fans, and I've been fielding questions about this ever since it got announced. I actually don't really like the deal, to be completely honest with you. I think Souths are verging on the edge of what the Dragons have been doing. I feel like they're maybe trying to bring in players that have showed promise but aren't quite at that stage of their career anymore. I look at guys like Whiten, for example, and now Fafita as well, guys who have had great form in the past but are struggling to sort of recapture that right now. I don't know if this is exactly what South Sydney needs right now. I feel like Fafita would have been better off going to a club that's a little bit more stable right now than South Sydney. I don't know if this is much of a step up from the situation that he was already in. But what I do believe this is a part of, I think this is a moving parts sort of move right now where we're going to see a few other moves around the league that are going to be influenced by this particular move, specifically with Tino and the man that we're going to get to shortly, Pappenhausen. I feel like maybe there's a little bit of sort of salary cap space opening up for some certain clubs to make big moves, and this is sort of just a part of that. I'll be interested to see where the Titans go from here as well, now that they've got Fafita off the books. I think another little part of this to keep an eye on as well will be Colin Matangi, to see what he does, if he's happy to sort of sit in the pack with Fafita or if he decides to move on and go somewhere else. But yeah, look, for me, this isn't a winning move. I don't think Fafita really needed this at this stage of his career. I think he could have done better by going somewhere where he had more stability.
Well, I think if anybody can do it, there's probably two coaches that can change a player around these days if they are out of form at the current club that they are at, and that is Craig Bellamy. We've seen that time and time again, bringing in regular first graders and turning them into superstars. But I also believe Wayne Bennett can do that as well. The Titans, they've got to pay $250,000, they're going to pay. Part of the deal was they're going to pay $250,000 for 2 years. To South Sydney, so they'll still have $250,000 on their cap for David Fafita. So he was on big money anyway as well. But look, I think it could be a good change. A change is as good as a holiday, so they say sometimes. And look, I think Wayne Bennett can get the best out of him, and maybe we can see him play Origin again as well. DCE, it hasn't been announced yet, but more than likely he was going to sign with the Roosters. Now, it doesn't know whether it's going to be a 1 year deal or 2 year deal, but the interesting part about this one is the fact that with him going to potentially sign, as I said, he hasn't signed yet, Hugo Savala is going to put himself on the open market. Now, he played pretty good this year, don't you think?
I liked Hugo. I thought Hugo had a pretty decent season. The same with Sandon Smith. I thought Sandon Smith might have been a name that we would have seen sort of floating around right about now, but he decided to lock his future away early and sign with Newcastle, which I also don't necessarily think is a great move for him. I hope Hugo ends up somewhere where he's going to be appreciated and is going to be used correctly. Because we are seeing a lot of moves happening right now which are not necessarily moves that I would have made personally. I think a lot of the moves that we're seeing today are moves like that. They're risky sort of moves. I think this DCE move to the Roosters is a risky one. I think he's risking his legacy at Manly by doing this. And I think the Roosters are taking a risk to try to take a big swing at the premiership too. So they've managed to lose Sandon Smith and possibly now Hugo because of this move. Do you think it's really worth it for 1 or 2 seasons of DCE?
Well, they're obviously trying to buy another premiership, the Roosters, by signing...
They're good at that.
Yeah, they are, and that's what they're in the business of signing, or they're in the business of premierships, the Roosters, so... look, it will strengthen their side if he does go there. Be interesting to see if he does put his hand up for Origin next year for Queensland. He played game 1 but then was dropped for games 2 and 3. So it will be interesting to see if he does put his hand up again for representative football. I believe he will because he hasn't announced anything, but maybe the Roosters will say, well, look, stick with us
Well, on that note, actually, who would their other options be? You've got Munster. Munster's injured most weeks of the year. What's if Munster's down injured again around Origin time? What have they got besides DCE? Obviously, Dearden will be the halfback, you'd think, or they possibly shift him to 5'8". If DCE doesn't put his hand up, who do we look at there?
Well, there's Ezra Mam. There's obviously...
There's Ben Hunt as well, but I'm not sure if he'd necessarily be playing in the halves role. I think they like him more at the hooker role for Origin.
Yeah, to come off the bench, I think, and add some spark off the bench and give Harry Grant a little bit of a break. But we also have seen them play at the same time on the field. So Ezra Mam, he springs to mind. Obviously Tom Dearden. Cameron Munster's there as well. Obviously DCE. So they've got a few options there, but I'm just trying to think of who else there would be.
It doesn't seem like a very deep pool, does it?
But anyway, who cares? It's Queensland. Who cares? We don't really care about that. So
we hope it's a shallow pool. That's what we want.
That's right. But that one hasn't been announced. But the big breaking news that happened today, whilst we were both at work, was Ryan Pappenhausen. He has been released from the final year of his contract. Now, I do believe he had an option for 2027 in his favour, but he has been released from the Melbourne Storm. Now, that is big news. More than likely, Suafai-Longo will go into that fullback position, and probably rightfully so. What do you make of this decision by Brian Pappenhausen and also the Melbourne Storm?
Yeah, look, this one's one that really surprised me. You and I have quite often got our ears to the ground when it comes to things like this with what we do and the things that we do in our spare time and in our professional lives. We're quite often hearing news sort of before it happens, or we're getting inklings of things that are going on. This one came out of absolutely nowhere, and I've only had maybe an hour or two with it to sort of think about it and gather my thoughts on it, and I'm still a little bit confused over what this could be leading to or what this could mean. I sort of hinted earlier with the David Fafita news that I feel like this could have something to do with Tino. I feel like possibly the Storm have done some type of deal to get Tino into the club early, and maybe this was just the salary cap space being moved around to make that happen. Maybe they know that Pap's on his way out at the end of next season anyway, and they've just pulled the plug early. This could also be Pappenhausen possibly just wanting a change of scenery and going to a new NRL club. If that was to happen, I think Parramatta would be quite high up on that list of places that he'd have a look at.
Don't say that. The listeners will call you crazy. Is that because of the Jason Riles connection? And we have seen both Nelson mentioned as a Parramatta recruit, and we've just signed Jonah Pezzett for 1 year, another Melbourne player. So does that mean every Melbourne player that comes off contract or leaves the club is going to be associated with Parramatta?
Look, at this stage, that's what it's looking like, and it's not really much of a surprise. We knew that Riles would have a crack at trying to raid his old club. He's very well respected by the playing group there, and obviously it looks like Melbourne's sort of at that turning point right now with their roster where they're ready to sort of just turn it over and start fresh again. So it would not surprise me one bit to see a few more Melbourne players get linked with Parramatta at this point. The key thing to remember with Pappenhausen as well is he was quite heavily linked with us in the previous off-season as well. So this isn't a fresh link for us. It's not like he's just suddenly come off contract and all of a sudden, just because we've got Jason Riles, we're being linked. This was something that has existed for a while. He does have family in Sydney, and it is the logical place for him to go if he decides not to go to Rugby 360. But on the other side of this as well, just getting off Parramatta for a little bit, this could also just be him wanting to take a break as well. He might have that Rugby 360 deal done. He might not have it done. It might be that he just needs a bit of time away from the game to gather his thoughts and to think about what he wants to do in life. We have seen players do that in the past. I think He's a pretty strong-headed kid, but he has had a lot of injury concern with his career, so he's probably thinking about life after football at the moment as well. And maybe he just needs a break.
Well, yeah, I mean, do you think his rugby league career is finished now?
If he goes to Rugby 360, I think it is. I don't see him coming back as a 37-year-old. I think the NRL is going to stick by this 10-year ban. I think they're going to have to make an example out of somebody, and I think Pappenhausen's probably the closest, probably highest profile name that they can make an example out of, besides Lomax, who I'm still on the fence about whether or not Lomax goes. I actually feel like the news of Lomax has died down a fair bit since that previous report, so that's probably a good sign for us, at least. But I think if they're going to make an example out of anybody, making an example out of the multi-time premiership winner, Origin player, etc., that's probably the one that you look at. If you want to make that sort of big splash in the sort of agent pool of basically saying, you know, that we're serious about what we're saying and you better get in line. That's probably that's probably a lot of what's been on his mind lately as well. We have seen a report come out from one of the higher ups at Melbourne. I'm not sure if it was the CEO, if it was someone else, but I did have a brief read over that over a beautiful souvlaki this afternoon. And basically he was saying some sentiments along the same lines of, you know, we're not quite sure what Ryan's doing. We don't know if he's signed with Rugby 360. We don't know if he wants to go to another NRL club. We just know that he's exhausted at the moment and needs a bit of time away from the game. So I think that's more realistically what this is about. But it's very, very interesting to see what the next move in his career is going to be. But I really wouldn't be shocked to see him take a gap year, to be honest.
But do you think if the Melbourne Storm thought that he needed a break, then do you think then they still would have had him on contract and given him the leniency of just taking as much time as what he needed? Rather than go their separate ways?
It could also be that he was already on his way out of the door. It could be that he'd already been contacted by Mal Meninga and he's going to Perth to be their sort of marquee player. There was mentions in that article as well about the possibility of him playing overseas, whether it be in rugby league or not. So it may be that he's got a mega payday coming in England and he's just deciding to take a scene change. It could be anything really. Like this is another one of those sort of peasant style situations where it's very unusual and it's very unheard of, and we sort of don't really know what the rule book is around what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it certainly is. And look, he's a premiership winner, a Clive Churchill medal winner. The only thing that he hasn't done is represent Australia and also played Origin. So those two things he hasn't done. But he's premiership winner, Clive Churchill medal winner, try scorer, certainly got one of the best mullets in the NRL, and he's a fan favourite. Certainly remember, I think it may have been about his third or fourth game in the NRL, and that was that magic round in Brisbane in 2019, when Melbourne absolutely smashed Parramatta, 64 points to 12 or something like that. But he was the star on that day.
Thanks for the reminder on that one.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. But yeah, he absolutely carved it up. But look, it's certainly going to be interesting. Watch his space. I'm sure all the journos will be on to it and seeing what's going to happen. It may also mean that it is the end of the 167 podcast that he does with Jerome Hughes and Cameron Munster. So maybe we might get one over the 167 podcast. We might get some listeners from there.
On that note, with those two, just before we get a little bit too off track, what do you think happens with Hughes and Munster now as well? Because they are on the wrong side of 30 now, and it does look like that Melbourne squad is starting to implode. It looks like maybe they're heading in a different direction.
No, I don't.
Do you think?
I don't think it's starting to implode. I think, I don't think it's starting to implode. I think it's just players. Look, Big Nelson, they were disappointed in his form and getting suspended and the like, and felt like he needed a change. Jonah, he went for an opportunity to play regular first grade. We don't know what the ins and outs of this one is, so I don't think they're imploding. I don't think they're going to go after Tino as well, because Tino at the moment I think is on $1.2 million, and apparently he's got some ratchet clauses in his contract at the Titans. So if he does go to Melbourne, then in the future when the salary cap goes up, he can get upwards of $1.5 million. So I don't know if Melbourne can afford that. So
they would be able to afford that now with Pappenhausen's 1.2 or whatever he was on off the books.
I think he was only on about 900,000 that I heard today.
Well, either way, you've got him coming off the books at close to $1 million. Let's say there or thereabouts. You've got Asafa Solomona coming off the books, who was upwards of 700. You've got potentially Munster coming off the books if he decides to go over and play in Perth, which has been heavily linked. You've also got to consider the fact there as well that although I find it highly unlikely, Craig Bellamy has been linked with an exit of late too. So I don't know. There's something about the situation in Melbourne right now that seems a bit smoky. It seems like there's something going on there. But it also is historically a club that gets through these situations quite well. So I don't think it's panic stations for them, but I definitely think it's a situation to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it will certainly be played out in the media, that is for sure. I'm sure they'll give him a few weeks leave and a break, but they'll have their ear to the ground as to what's happening. And look, we all don't know still what's going to happen with his R360 anyway as well. So we just have to
Do we know who his agent is?
I'm not 100% sure who that is. Yeah, so I don't know who that is.
Because it'll be interesting to see if it's one of the ones that we don't like, and see if we can possibly get him banned.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's going to happen, but yeah. Let's move forward now. So I think that's pretty much all the news of late that has happened in rugby league at the moment. Anyway, some big name contracts there, and look, it's only going to get worse from Saturday, being November 1. That's when all the fun
actually,
games
sorry,
start.
before we move on, one bit of news that we did miss: Dan Kerr has left Parramatta and he's signed with South Sydney. So farewell to Dan. Thanks for your time at Parramatta. He was a promising young forward, but he's decided to swap the blue and gold for green and red. So yeah, farewell to Dan.
Yes, thank you very much, Dan. I think New South Wales Cup captain as well, late this season as well. So unfortunately, they didn't get the chocolates this year, but yeah, we wish him all the best over at the Rabbitohs. Moving forward now to, I don't know if we'll have any more news next week, but I'm sure we will, because as I just said, November 1 is Saturday, and that's when all the fun and games begin with contracts for, 2027. So
I reckon the NRL world's going to look very different this time next week.
Well, let's hope so. We might have a lot more to talk about. Moving forward now to week 2 of the Pacific Championships, and look, there was 2 cracking games in the men's divisions. PNG got the winner over the Cook Islands, 40 points to 28. But the game that sort of went for about 3.5 hours, up there at Suncorp Stadium, was Tonga versus Samoa, interrupted by a thunder and lightning storm up there in Brisbane. So that was quite interesting. I think I can't remember what the score was at the time. I think it might have been about 22-0 or something like that, I think. But yeah, it was a game that went for about 3.5 hours. But 34 points to 6, Tonga lost to Samoa. Did you catch much of that game?
I actually did, thanks to the thanks to the thunderstorm break. um, I was just sort of coming in as it began, and yeah, when it sort of got cold off, obviously had a bit of time to settle in and sort of see what else was going on in the sports world. There was a fair bit going on at the time, so it was sort of hard to keep up with that game and sort of watch all the other things that I was interested in at the same time. We had the likes of the supercars on and
Yes.
basketball, and there was a lot going on that weekend. So the lightning break was actually quite welcomed. But I think the score at the time, if I'm correct, I think it was, I want to say it was about 16-0,
Okay.
maybe. I recall it still being sort of fairly close. I don't remember if it was
I think
before
you
or
could be right,
after
actually.
the Taulagi try, because the Taulagi try was in the 60th minute, I believe, and it was right about then that we had the break. So I can't remember if it was before or after that try, but I do recall it still sort of being in the balance, but you could sort of just see the writing was on the wall with Samoa. They were much, much stronger at the time. One thing that I do appreciate about that lightning break was the Samoa fans celebrating outside my house close to midnight when that game finished. That was quite fun. Um, so thank you, Brisbane weather, for that one. But yeah, no, look, I think it's an expected result there. I think Samoa were far stronger and they were the better team on the day. Interesting to see something that we sort of briefly touched on last week with Iongi at 6. I think we can sort of put to bed the conversation of him playing as a 6 at Parramatta. I don't think that's his natural position. I think we sort of saw that in that game. So that's probably the main takeaway for Para fans, at least, in that game. And Junior Paulo's incredible performance at 13, that may cause a bit of a stir up in the training field. Maybe we see Paulo at lock next season. What do you reckon?
No, he'll be a front rower at Parramatta. That's for sure. But that was an outstanding performance from Junior Paulo. Probably one of the best I've ever seen. 74 minutes.
I actually quite questioned it before that game. I wasn't sure how he'd go at 13, but he was phenomenal.
Absolutely. Pulled off one of the biggest hits you'll ever see on Sonny Luke. I mean, Sonny Luke's only a small fella, a hooker. They're probably all big to me anyway, but Sonny's only one of the little fellas, but still it was a massive hit that got replays after replays. Payne Haas on the sideline, he was taken back as to how big it was. He's passed to Payne Haas for his try. It just shows you the ball playing skills that he does have, which is another handy for Parramatta, the artillery there. 30 tackles in the game, including that monstrous one. 11 runs, 97 metres. But yeah, just his leadership. He's looking really good at the moment in terms of his condition and really fit, and he's looking like he's really determined and great for all the young blokes, especially in that forward pack for Samoa.
Yep, that's for sure. I did, like I said, I did have a bit of a question mark heading into that match on how that forward pack was going to go, but a lot of those question marks were very quickly answered. One thing that I do find interesting with these island nations is they always seem to develop elite players in very specific position groups all at the same time, but they never seem to sort of develop a full 13 all at the same time. So it seems like they've always got good hookers coming through, or good halves coming through, or good fullbacks coming through, but then they'll be missing wingers or centres or props or second rowers or something. It always seems like there's some sort of gap in these rosters. Why do you think that might be?
I don't know, to be honest. I think it's a pretty fair squad, to be honest, across the park.
In terms of matching it with the likes of New Zealand and England and Australia and whatnot, though, like we're seeing so many Pacific Island nation players in the NRL now, and it seems like there's more of them than there is of us at times in the NRL. But when it comes to the actual international side of the game, we're still seeing those large gaps in the rosters. That to me is quite, I don't want to say concerning, because I don't think it's big concern, but it's interesting. It's something to sort of have a look at.
Well, I think Samoa, they made the World Cup final in 2022, and I think if they play like they did against New Zealand, I mean, saying that, they did go down to New Zealand, but if they play like that against Australia and they play the way that they did against Tonga versus Australia, they have a very, very good chance of beating them, to be honest. So I think they've got all bases covered.
To be honest, it's a conversation you could even have about Australia too, because we did mention in last week in our preview of the Australia game that it was a bit strange to see second rowers lining up at prop for Australia, where that's sort of the same thing that we see here. We're seeing props that are lining up in the second row for Samoa. It's a bit funny.
I think too, though, when it comes to international football, and you just mentioned it there with Australia, with players playing out of position, I think with international football, I think it's just about getting the best players into your team, and somehow managing them into that team and getting them into a position that they can play. So, you know what I mean? Like, so you're going to get the best players, whether they're in that position that they play at club level or not.
I can hear what you're saying there, but then I also look at the Tonga roster and I see that Paul Alamoti's been left out of that roster, but they have brought in someone like Sonny Luke, who obviously, as we mentioned, wasn't really up for the game. Did find himself getting flogged by Junior. Do you think Tonga's taken that approach, where they've just tried to get the best players in, regardless of what position that they play? Because for me, Alamotti should be in that roster.
Where would you put Alamotti?
I don't know if I would put him at centre or just put him on the bench and bring him in, sort of in and around the second row centre. Sort of try to get a bit of game breaking speed in there. Maybe even chuck him in at hooker for a couple of reps. I don't know. How do you utilise someone like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think he does have a place in this team, to be honest. As much as you would want him in that side, I just think Sonny Luke, he's a interchange hooker for Havili, and in the centre position for Tonga, you got Tolu Kula and Robert Toya, the Rookie of the Year. So, and on the wings, you got Daniel Tupou and Sione Katoa. So, I mean, Will Penasini can't even get a start in the centres for Tonga. So, and we love Will, but I think it's just a little bit hard for him to get into this team. Sure, if they were losing each and every week, or if there was a desperate decision for this game this week, then maybe you would try something. But because it's such a short series, it's hard to make mass changes to your team.
Yeah, and then on the same side of that as well, where we're seeing them sort of brush off these other players, but then they're still not getting the result either. So where does it sort of lie? I look at the hooking position in particular for Tonga, and I think that's a real problem. I think Havili's a good player, but he's not the kind of player that you're expecting to take you to international glory. And I definitely don't think Sonny Luke is the answer there either. And that sort of comes back to what I'm talking about. It always seems like there is a levy of great options in one position, and then there is just a complete gap in other positions. And I think Tonga's, in particular, is the hooking position.
But don't forget too, it was Tonga's first game in the Pacific Championships, so we may see a different Tongan side this week against New Zealand. So it was their first game. One question I want to ask you is, we mentioned the lightning break, and it was for a good, I think, 40 minutes to an hour, but Samoa were leading 16-0. What are your thoughts about that? With the game being called off for so long, what do you think would have happened if Tonga did come back and win that game? Do you think that's fair, or what do you think should have happened?
Well, that's just sport. We've seen that happen before. There was a really interesting situation like that in the Club World Cup in Soccerland over over the sort of preseason there. My team, Chelsea, we were up against a team from, I think it was Argentina or someone like that, and there was a lightning break in that game. The game was delayed. I think there was something like 2 minutes left in the game, and the game was delayed for about 2 or 3 hours. And then by the time that the players got back on the pitch, it was like 1 or 2 in the morning local time, and the team actually came back and took it to extra time, and then we ended up winning in extra time over that team. So it was the sort of thing where all of us were sort of sitting back for hours and hours and hours waiting for this game to restart, and we were just like, "Come on, man! There's 2 minutes to go. Just call it off." And then the other team ended up almost making a full comeback and almost beat us. So. It's an interesting one. It happens in sport, but I don't think it's unfair. I think the players are paid to play the full length of the game, and they should play the full length of the game.
Yep, fair enough. The Gillaroos, they got a win 60 points to nil over Samoa, so it was half 50% win record for Samoa on the weekend up there at Suncorp Stadium. I think the Gillaroos are just too classy across the park. Hopefully this weekend against the Kiwi Ferns, we see a little bit of a closer competition and hopefully a closer game, because we don't like to see those big scores. I mean, yeah, we love to see tries, no doubt, but it's not too good for the international game. One highlight out of that was Julia Robinson's try. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out. It's probably on YouTube. Just Google it, you'll see it. But the other big game that was on the weekend, and one that we were all waiting for, was the first test over there in England. The Ashes, after 22 years, was back again. It was England taking on the Kangaroos at Wembley Stadium. 60,000 there, a capacity of 90,000 apparently, but 60,000 there saw the Kangaroos get the victory 26 points to 6, only 8-0 at half time. What were your thoughts on this game? Now, you told me you were going to stay up for this game. Did you stay up for it?
I did stay up for it, and I almost immediately regretted it. It was an absolute snooze fest, that game. I don't know sort of what sort of went wrong when it came to the entertainment in that game, because it just didn't kick off really, did it? We sort of spoke amongst each other while this game was going on, and I don't know. I think if I wasn't also staying up to watch the Chelsea game side by side with this one, I probably would have just gone to bed, to be honest, because it wasn't the most entertaining game, was it?
No, I must admit it wasn't, and I'm not 100% sure what that reason was. I'm sure we'll see a better contest this weekend again between these two sides, but maybe it was the fact that some of these players haven't played in a long time. Most of these players, especially the Brisbane players and the Melbourne players, played three weeks ago, I guess it was. But someone like Josh Adokar, he hasn't played since September. Obviously played in the Koori knockout, but not like an NRL game or whatever. But maybe that was it. I actually was a little bit disappointed in the not necessarily the crowd, because I knew Wembley Stadium would be hard to sell out to the English crowd, as they're not massive. Obviously soccer's the number one sport over there, but I didn't sense a feeling of an English crowd through the TV screens. Did you at all?
No, to be honest, every time we had a look at the crowd and we got crowd shots, I was seeing a lot of green and gold. I don't really feel like the English fans took this game seriously. Unfortunately for England, I anticipate the same result for this next game as well. I actually think we're going to completely flog England in this next match. I reckon this could be a 30, 40, 50 plus win. I think that the lower scoreline of this previous match was more down to Australia themselves not being settled in. There was a few uncharacteristic handling errors and whatnot in that game. There was a few moments there where we looked sort of off a step or two. I think they'll get that sorted. They'll get themselves in the right headspace in this match, and I think they'll go for the throat, and we're going to see a bit of a mauling, unfortunately, for England.
Reece Walsh, he scored 2 tries. His first try was a Superman diving act. Certainly caught the crowd's eye, that is for sure. He got man of the match. He just keeps on going on. But he was lucky, I thought, to stay on the field at one stage. He did grab Herbie Farnworth by the collar and dragged him back. Are you thinking he may have served some time in the sin bin for that?
I think Reece Walsh has drunk from a golden toilet recently, and everything that he sort of touches right now seems to turn to gold. So I don't think there's anything that he can do wrong that would possibly get him in that situation, to be honest. I think I think he's had some fantastic luck over the last sort of 10 to 12 weeks of his career, and I think he's riding that momentum, and I'm just not going to question it.
Yeah, as you said, a golden toilet. Sounds funny, but yeah, it certainly was a great performance, that is for sure. Unfortunately, though, Isaiah Yeo, he suffered a concussion early on in the game. I think it was after 11 minutes or so, and is therefore out of this weekend's game. Now, Harry Grant has been named captain of the Australian side for this week, and congratulations to Harry Grant for being named captain of your country. It's a huge honour. Do you think Harry was the right choice as captain of the Kangaroos? Considering Cameron Munster is the captain of Queensland.
Yes and no. I don't have a problem with it. I do think that possibly you'd go with Munster. But I don't know. I don't really have a problem with it, to be honest. Who would you really sort of have as your other options there? I know you mentioned Munster. Who else could we sort of look at as an option? Because I don't think Harry Grant's really a bad choice. You probably wouldn't really go with Walsh, but other than Cleary or maybe even Angus or Carrigan even. I don't know. Who do you go with besides Grant?
Yeah, no, you're probably right there. It probably is the best choice. I just thought it may have just gone to the Queensland captain, to be honest. Certainly.
Could this be a sign that maybe Munster doesn't play the full 80 minutes? Maybe they bring Dearden on at some point in this game and give Munster a bit of a break. Maybe they're planning on playing Harry for the full 80.
Oh, no, I don't think that's the case. I think Dearden will come on for Harry at some stage, even though Harry is a 80-minute player. But, yeah, I think it was the fact that also during this game, the game number 1, I think he did take up the reins as captain on the field when Isaiah went off. But, yeah, certainly a big blow for Isaiah. I mean, you play all season and you know that this tour is on at the end of the year, and you're on the plane and you're in England and you're playing in game 1, and then your last 11 minutes and then you miss the next game, and hopefully definitely he'll be back for game number 3. But it's an interesting one. Pat Carrigan goes back to lock and Lindsay Collins comes into the starting side, and Lindsay Smith comes onto the interchange bench. Would you have gone for anybody else on the interchange bench or even at lock?
To be completely honest, my bigger talking point of this isn't really Harry Grant. It's actually how little we've seen that squad change. I really anticipated that this would be a rotational squad and we would see guys like Moses and Preston and Bradman Best and guys of that nature getting into the squad and having a look. Maybe we see that for game 3. I hope we see that for game 3. Usually that's what these tours are about. It's about sort of getting everybody involved and not sort of bringing in a whole squad of players for no reason. I don't know. it feels weird to me to see a touring squad that doesn't rotate.
Yeah, it is a little bit of one. It's I think I do agree with you there. With game number 3, you may see some of these players come back for game number 3, but then do you really want to, change Reece Walsh for Dylan Edwards for game 3?
Well, it's sort of just a question of what's the point of bringing a whole squad if you're not going to use a whole squad? It's just sort of a waste of resources then, isn't it?
Well,
they were already talking at the start of this tour about sort of cutting costs down and trying to sort of manage the funds in a better way. There was a couple of coaches that were left behind in Australia because they didn't want to resource those coaches out. They felt like it was a waste of money, but then you take a whole squad over there and you're wasting the money on that whole squad. It's kind of a contradiction, is it not?
Well, I think you have to take the number of players away that they have, to be honest. What is there, 20 players that have gone over? Potentially 22, maybe? Because you just...
But then again, in saying that, the whole reason you take a squad of that size is so you can rotate it around and guys do get opportunities.
Unfortunately, though, it's not like the old Kangaroo tours back in the day where they do play multiple games on tour. So I guess they would just be there because we don't know what happens in rugby league. It's a strange game. Anybody can get injured at any point. So, and you obviously want those best players in reserve if one of your top line players does get injured. But also too, in saying that as well, it is also a good learning point being in these squads for these players that don't play, being in and around the best players in the country. I mean, you look at someone like Jacob Preston, for example, what he will take back to Canterbury from being on this tour. He spent time in the New South Wales Origin camp this year as well, so being in and around the squad as well prepares them for their actual opportunity when they do get a chance. I know Winston Neville, the big Canterbury fan, he's been calling for Jacob to be selected by Kevin Walters so he can go out and buy his Kangaroos jersey, maybe hopefully from the corner post, but and get Preston on the back.
Yeah, I would welcome. I would welcome that. He can come down and grab his jersey if he likes. So I'm pretty sure we are getting the Kangaroos jerseys in at some point. So that can be an option for Winston.
Well,
but,
he'll only go if he gets selected. He's not going to buy one if he doesn't get selected.
Well, I'll pose a question for you on that. Now, given these games, I don't want to call these games dead rubbers, but I think you know what I mean. These games aren't necessarily games that are sort of for anything. These are post-season games where we don't want players getting hurt. We don't want to risk our player safety, but at the same time, we want to see the best players on the pitch. Is this a situation that we could look at where sort of other sports, again, we're delving into the other sports thing here, other sports tend to treat these games sort of in an exhibition way where they'll extend the bench. Is this something that we could look at for these type of matches so we can see more players getting onto the pitch?
No, I don't think so. I think you need to keep the game as what it is in its regular throughout the regular season. So I don't think trial games, yes, because they're played in extreme heat over here in Australia, and it's only trial games. You're not playing for anything. You're just playing for combinations and the like. But I think these sort of games, you do need to stick to whatever your normal NRL games and rules. And
look, I'd be happy to keep the same number of interchanges and just have maybe an extra player or two there available to put on the field. Maybe you just put that 18th man as an option. Maybe it's something like past 60 minutes we can activate the 18th man. He can come on at the expense of an interchange. Something like that.
Yeah, no, I think you just keep it the same as it is. I don't think you go around changing it. But England, they haven't named their team for this week again. I'm not seeing any team lists. Why do you think they're doing that? And who do you think they should bring in? AJ Brimson is in the squad. Do you think he gets a start this week?
I think he'd probably need to. I don't really know what England can do to fight off Australia. To be honest, I think it's a bit of a losing battle, unfortunately. I said this at the start of the tour, and if England fails to win this game, I'll maintain the same opinion. The opinion might change if England manages to pull out a win here, but I think this would have been better off being a Great Britain tour rather than an England tour. It would have sort of given them a few more options there to try to match the fight. But I don't know. I think this is a losing fight for England. That coaching job right now would be one of the toughest ones in the world, because what do you do? Really, what can you bring that's going to make a difference?
Yeah, no, it certainly is a tough one. They did have a few opportunities last week in the game. They did make a few breaks, just couldn't capitalise.
Do you think that was England being good, or do you think that was just Australia not being quite ready for the tour?
I think it was just England being good at some stages, but they just couldn't capitalise on the good that they did. There was a ball that went over the dead ball line from a kick, and there was a couple others as well. But Jack Wellesby at the fullback position, he made an interesting choice when Angus Crichton was running at him. Something that I haven't seen before, or he just sort of not backtracked, but didn't come forward, and Angus found himself. Oh, there's the line. I better put it down now. So that sort of thing. But look, I don't know what they're going to do. Where they're going to put AJ Brimson into this side. I don't know.
How do we close the gap? What do we need to do to get this gap to close? Because as Australians, obviously we want to see Australia win, but we also want to see a competitive game. How do we close the gap?
More England players playing over in the NRL, perhaps, because we know that the NRL is the greatest rugby league competition in the world. Maybe some more internationals somewhere throughout the year, but the Players Association won't have that because they say that we're already playing too many games as it is, and it's too stressful.
Which I don't buy. I've never bought that. I've never ever bought into we're playing too many games. I really don't think we're playing enough rugby league, to be honest, but that's just my opinion.
I agree, and I think if you ask the players, and if they were to say, oh, would you like to play for Australia today, be it middle of the season, I dare say they would say yes.
I miss the Anzac Test. That was always one of the great sporting spectacles when we were sort of taking that little mid-year break and we got to see Australia versus New Zealand in the middle of the season when everybody was primed and ready to go. I felt like that was always a fantastic experience. I feel like we could bring sort of that weekend back as well, and we could have a Pacific round as well. We could have there's so many opportunities of things that we can do throughout the season to push the international game and get that to a point where it really deserves to be, but we're sort of just not doing it. We're leaving it behind, and we're focusing so heavily on getting State of Origin and NRL in particular overseas, when it feels like the simpler option there is to take the international game overseas rather than taking our actual home games away from the home fans. We're taking games to Vegas. We're taking NRLs now. There's talks of NRLs going to New Zealand, Origin, going to New Zealand, and all this kind of stuff, when we could just be doing that with the international game.
Well, I think you might find when Perth come into the competition in 2027, that will make it an 18-team competition. So I don't necessarily think there could or will be the necessary need for having a bye that when there's an even amount of nine games each and every weekend. Unless two teams have a bye in there. But you're right, they could maybe halt the competition, shorten the competition, halt it in around Anzac time, Have you?
I'll tell you what, off the top of my head, I've just thought of something that I think would be a really good way of doing things. I would love to see the competition get halted for maybe 3 to 4 weeks, potentially. I'd like to see State of Origin played in 3 back-to-back weeks, and then I'd like to also see a Pacific Nations playoff throughout that time period as well. And then right at the end of that time period, I'd love to see an Anzac Test and then a Pacific Nations final on the same day at the same stadium. How do you reckon that sounds?
I mean, it sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good.
And then also just chuck it in there as well. City Country. Let's bring that back.
Yeah, no, I'd love to see that one back as well. That was a great game as well. But look, I think it's a great idea. A great idea. Awesome idea. I just don't think that the TV people will go for that one. The broadcasters won't go for that because they won't get as many eyeballs on these games as what they will with NRL games. So
then why don't they just add more NRL games? If they want more eyeballs, add more games.
Because the Players Association and they say that they play too many games as it is right now anyway. But
I don't think they like how much logic we've got here. I think that's the problem.
No, the pundits, they know better than what the people in the NRL and
us the viewers know what we want.
Yeah, that's it. We just want rugby league, 24/7. But that's not going to happen. But if international round gets the go ahead, then that will be a 24-hour. Well, not a 24-hour, but probably about a 14-hour day of rugby league, back to back to back to back.
I'll tell you what, I hated COVID for a lot of reasons, but one thing I loved about COVID was rugby league on a Wednesday. That was different. That was interesting.
Yeah, I don't quite remember that one. Was that NRL?
Yeah, I think we had a few games there that were mixed out throughout the week, didn't we? Throughout COVID.
Oh, I'd have to go back and have a look, but yeah, I don't remember.
It was a strange time, but it was an interesting time. We seemed to have sport on every day of the week, and that's what got me through anyway. I was living in a small country town on my own, away from all my friends and family at the time, so being able to chuck the TV on at any given time and see some live sport was always great. But I don't think it's something that we could viably ever do, but we've had another pandemic.
Yeah, no, whenever it was being played, it certainly was rugby league that made a lot of us sane during that period. But we can both agree that it will be Australia to win this game number 2 being played in Liverpool. Let's just hope we see a better game, better contest. This one is on at 1:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. Australian, I think it's Eastern Daylight Savings Time, so that one's going to be an extra hard struggle to stay awake for, I think. I might have to get a couple of hours sleep beforehand and then wake up for it, and then I might have to get a couple of hours sleep after it, because on Sunday, now if you are in the Sydney area on Sunday, we have a special event on Sunday, don't we, at the Corner Post at Westfield Liverpool?
Yes.
Tell us all about that one.
At the other Liverpool, so we've got Australia playing at one Liverpool, and we're going to be hanging out at the other Liverpool.
I did not even think of that. What a coincidence! What's happening at the Corner Post at Westfield Liverpool on Sunday?
We have a really great event going on in store. We've got Eric Groth Senior and David Lydiard coming into the store for a few hours to have a bit of fun with us, and all the fans as well. Everybody's invited. There's no entry fee for this. It's a free event. Everybody can come down. Bring your kids, bring your wife, bring your mates, bring whoever you want. Bring your neighbour that you don't like. Who cares? Bring everyone. But yeah, no, this is a free event. There's no entry fee. You're not going to be pushed to buy anything in store if you don't want to. If you just want to come down and chat with the guys, you're more than welcome to do that too. Of course, we'd like it if you bought something while you're in the store as well, but you're not obliged to do that in any means whatsoever. We were meant to be getting Eric Groth Jr. in for this event as well, but he's had to reschedule, so we'll have news on that at a later date as well. So as far as I know, that's still happening, but it's just going to be at a later date. So instead, we've got Dave coming down, and Dave's a really great bloke. If you've never met him, you'll love him.
Yeah, no, David Lydiard, he is a premiership winner, and yeah, he's a great bloke. He always makes time to speak to me whenever I see him at Parramatta games or events. So he's a great bloke, Mr. Lydia.
Definitely not a bad runners-up prize, that's for sure.
No, that's it. Can't go past a premiership winner. And also Eric Grove Senior, what a player, what a man. Again, has a lot of time for myself and the fans when he sees them at games. And it'll be great to chew the fat with them and bring your stuff down, get it signed, and have a chat. Ask them some questions. We certainly will be asking them some questions on Sunday, which should be a lot of fun. But get down there. Look, it's not only for Parramatta fans, but David played for Manly and also Penrith as well. So if you want to get one of those, I do believe you got the Penrith City retro jerseys there at the corner post.
Correct,
so
we do.
I think he may have played in one of those, so
he did play in that one as well. So that is something I'd already thought about throughout the week. But don't threaten as well. If you guys don't have anything to sign and you still want to get a signature, the boys will be handing out posters as well. So we've organised some posters to get signed, so you can head on down to Kmart or Officeworks and get those framed and put them up in your office or in your bedroom or somewhere in your house.
Or your Paracave.
Yeah, in your Paracave as well. So that's definitely going to be an option, and you can always just buy yourself a nice classic Para jersey and get them to sign that as well.
And don't be afraid. Ben and I will be there as well. So come and say good day. If you enjoy the podcast, come and get a selfie, get an autograph, whatever you want. We're not shy. We don't bite hard, so we're happy to have a chat as well.
And we may also have a little bit of fan interaction going on there as well. So we'll put that out of the universe and see what potentially pops up from that.
Yes, that will be interesting and fun as well. Well, that is another news and reviews podcast done. As I said, a lot of news, and it's only Thursday this week in the world of the NRL. A little bit of Parramatta news as well. But certainly week 2 of the Pacific Championships done, week 1 of the Ashes Test done. So now it's week 3 of the Pacific Championships, which will determine the teams that go into the finals for that one, which is played at Wembley Stadium, and obviously week 2 of the Ashes, so cannot wait for that one. So as I said, I'll have to get a couple of hours sleep after that game, because I might be a bit bleary-eyed on Sundays, but I'll have to be pumped and ready to get that one going. So thank you very much, Ben, for joining me once again, and I will see you on Sunday at the corner post at Westfield, Liverpool.
Looking forward to it. I think I'll be a little bit red-eyed as well, so it'll be 2 of us, don't worry.
No, it should be great times, that is for sure. That's it for another episode of the Paracave podcast, by the fans, for the fans, and go Para!
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. See you next time.